When should you look at outsourcing?
There is definitely a case for outsourcing to fill skills gaps. It's also often easier to maintain a stable team in an outsourcing environment than it is at home. There isn't the same competition for people. There isn't the same sort of almost, I was going to say tradition, but the same tendency for people to move on and be offered another a bit more money and to move on here and here. You can get a more stable environment. So you can get the skills you need. You may not need those skills for as long as long as you might for a full-time employment. You might only need them to fulfill a sort of 3 or 4 or 5, 6 month project, etc. So you get more flexibility as well in your numbers, etc. But stability, flexibility, and really, I think cost is the last thing you should be considering.
What are the current relationship and pricing models?
In terms of relationship models, you can hire directly. So you can find people in either the individual host country that you're looking for or in multiple host countries, and you can hire them into your team directly. And you can do that either just through your own efforts, or there are a number of agencies who will help you to find people. And that is a model I've used in the past and can work well. It's best where you're looking at sort of long-term relationships, but conversely, it sort of also has the problem that you've got a very distributed team, generally working from home. There is no way you can really enforce the employment contracts that you've put in, etc., because they're wherever they are, and equally there are various security and GDPR problems, etc., with as a team distributed like that. So it sort of depends on the work you're doing, but it's a model that can work well, and it's obviously cheaper than going through a vendor. Going through a vendor like ourselves gives you the ability to move a lot quicker. We're likely to have the talent that you need either available straight away or available relatively quickly. And obviously we have all of the security requirements you might need, source control, task management, GDPR compliance, etc., etc. But you pay a premium for it. We have to make a living, so you'll pay slightly more going through a vendor than you will hiring directly. Or you can look at the sort of task-based approach where you put an individual task onto a platform and people bid for the job to perform that particular task. This model's already best suited to sort of very small, very definable tasks. The next sort of stage on from hiring direct, and often a stage on from using a vendor as well, is to establish your own outsourcing office. Now, that's a huge commitment in that you're taking on the responsibilities of an office and all of the other infrastructure that needs to go with it. And that can work very, very well. It's a long-term commitment. It's basically building your team as if you were building it in your own office, but somewhere else. In the modern environment, those communications make that possible. So that's a perfectly viable option, but a very long-term one. You also have sort of with the different models, different pricing models. So you can look at fixed price contracts where you have a project which you can clearly define. The issues around that are simply the same as they are whether you're doing it as an outsourced model or a model just within the UK. You have to be able to define it, and you have to be able to write a specification or at least a set of user stories which explain properly what you need to do. So that's one common model. Another common model is to use a time and materials contract. Time and materials basically fits into the whole agile sort of programming mode much better, where you don't have necessarily fixed deliverables and you're changing them on a 2-weekly basis at scrums, etc. Time and materials contracts work very well for that. They also work very well for things like research and development projects. My only the thing I would say about time and materials projects and agile is, although you do want to manage your team, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, your outsourcing team at least as closely as you manage your internal team, I would not get fixated with every single dot and comma of agile methodology. In my experience, a hybrid model where you're looking at what the project is and how best to manage it is better suited than following every single dot and comma in an agile Bible. The last of the pricing models, I suppose, is a retainer based, where you're simply looking at manpower. You're not actually looking at any sort of project deliverables as part of the contract. You're just saying, I want 3 people who have these particular skills, and you can do that on a retainer model.
How do you select a vendor?
Look, there are lots of different aspects to selecting a vendor. There's selecting a host. Where are they going to be? There's selecting the size of the vendor. This is always assuming you've already decided the sort of whole relationship model. But my own view is that far more important than where they are and who they are is that you have a level of trust with that vendor. So I kind of think of it a lot like hiring a babysitter. You don't go and hire the cheapest babysitter, or the babysitter who sort of looks best, or the babysitter who is closest to your home. What you do is you find someone you're prepared to trust with your baby. And I'm not suggesting that a piece of software is as important as your children, but it's the same principle. You're going to hand over the development of something which is either, if you're a startup, is sort of very much important, embedded in yourself. I've been there and felt huge sort of ownership of the product. And if you're an enterprise organization, then your career is pretty well bound up in this decision. So take time, get to know the people. Take references, look at what they can do. There are various tests. I know there's a 10-point test which is called the How test, which is in a document that I've produced. I don't want to go through it all now, but you want to check that they have the testing requirement, the capabilities, that they have source code management capabilities, that they have task management capabilities. You want to look at their overall infrastructure. And are they just a sort of 10 developers sitting in an office somewhere, or do they have all of the backup resources that they will need? Are they working to ISO 27001 methodology? It really isn't that different to choosing a supplier in the UK, but it is really important that both on an organizational level and from looking at the infrastructure of the organization, and just as importantly on a personal level, that you trust the people you work with.